Okay, so let's get started. If that's okay with you, thanks a million for making the time for coming today, week 6. I know that on the context of it all, making time for continuous professional development is kind of the last thing on our list of priorities today, so most appreciated your time, and I really hope that it is a valuable time for you all. And I have met all of you really, but just to formally introduce myself. My name is Angelica Risquez, and I'm Technology Enhanced Learning Advisor in the Center for Teaching and Learning. And also we jointly drive the Technology Enhanced Learning units with our colleagues in ITV and Library. And this semester we have been driving this Take One Step project, which objective is to encourage people to make small incremental steps. So with the idea that once you make a box you can't stop and then you eat more of the chips, finish the whole box hopefully, but you just get started with the one. And don't quote me on that, yeah, pretty fine. Just to let you know that one of the objectives of this project is to curate a number of open educational resources, including a recording of our sessions. So this session is being streamed. I very much doubt that there's anyone on the other side, but just in case, hello. And but we also wanted to record it just to make it available to anyone, to loads of people that said that wanted to be here but couldn't be here today. So thanks a million for the attendance set, and there will be an attendance list, if you don't mind, circulated in a few minutes, so we can keep in touch with you all after the sessions today. We just had our launch for the Open Innovation, for the Innovation Fund of Open Educational Resources, and just to say that we are looking forward to continue the conversations from that. One of the ways that you may apply for funding for creating an open education resource is in order to work on flipping a classroom, creating some content that you may want to repurpose before your lectures in order for free of perhaps time to do something else in your lecture. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I will restart my projector, which seems to have on standby. And we are going to tiny bit to practice what a flipped classroom is about. So to that purpose, you may have received, those of you that raised for the session, you should have received an email from me yesterday that asked you to engage in a 2 minutes activity. Obviously, that is just meant to be a tokenistic example of what a real free session activity would look like or could feel like, as a simple example. Because obviously, in an ideal scenario, I would have you captured through assessment, and therefore I would actually engage you on a meaningful activity. But I don't know if many of you had an opportunity to do that. So it's as a showcase of what the flipped classroom is about, this idea that we invert the session stage to the facilitator role for the instructor, the lecturer, in that instead of just pushing content to you, you basically use the class time in order to do something more hands-on. That requires that students have a grasp of the concepts already, or they have become acquainted with the background or the context, and that's done on an independent basis before the class time, with an idea to do something in class and to do some follow-up activity afterwards. So in that way, the online and the class environment become meaningfully blended, and that is what we kind of talk when we talk about blended learning rather than just pushing information online. So that is the idea that we come from, and I suggested that you would watch a video. I am conscious that not 100% of everyone here today would have had an opportunity to watch that video. So I'm going to quickly play it, and that's a brief introduction to the classroom.
This is a classroom. The teacher stands at the front, and the students watch and listen. You'll recognize this because it's probably how you were taught, and how your parents were taught before you. But there are a lot of problems with this approach to teaching. You see, not all students learn at the same speed, so some get left behind. And while some students learn better by listening, others may learn better by doing. This means that teachers can't always do the best job they can, but there is another way. The flipped classroom addresses these problems and makes learning more personal. First, the teacher makes a video that delivers the content they'd usually teach in class. Then they share it online with students who can watch it before the next lesson. This leaves the teacher free to spend class time leading activities that help students apply the knowledge. Students can rewind and re-watch a video as many times as they like and come back to class with questions for the teacher. So keeping up with the class is no longer an issue. Students can access the video at any time using mobile devices, giving them the ability to learn more independently. Instead of sitting and listening, students can spend class time applying knowledge in more practical ways. And teachers are free to spend their time working with students and giving them individual support and attention. The flipped classroom model is already making a difference to students and teachers worldwide, so get involved. Discover more at flippedinstitute.org and become part of the movement.
Okay, that is somewhat, if you want, evangelical view of the flipped classroom, which you may agree with or not, but that is the content that I suggested you to watch. That will constitute the first push of content that I deliver to, in this case, my inverted commas students and learners in this exercise. And then I invited you to follow up with that mini exercise, which is involved just stating your opinion on a code. So just to very quickly collect how that opinion poll went, I am just going to quickly check how many answers did you get and what the result was. Okay, so thanks for your responses to the flipped classroom poll. And the question is, do you think the flipped classroom model is a useful approach to teaching and learning? And I had 9 responses, 9 of which are positive. So, well, it seems that we can all safely go home because my job is done here and no need to convince anyone today. It is, the exercise here is just to see if the opinion will be the same by the end of the session today, or some of you will have some new considerations that make that opinion to be somewhat questioned. We'll see what happens. So from this perspective, welcome everyone to the room. What I propose you to do today is a mini version of something that we do in the Specialist Diploma. Tends to be a bit of fun, which is a little Oxford debate on the topic. Why not? So we've introduced the session to those that couldn't access the email in the class. There was some invitation to watch videos, some invitation to take a poll, and so we'll follow with some hands-on work in the session today. And it looks like my classroom is very naturally divided in 2 groups because this is the way that we're going to work with it. We'll have our orange team here, and I have my positives on this, it doesn't matter. That's allocated by default, excuse me. So my orange team will speak for the motion, and my yellow team and the left will speak against the motion. I'll explain the motion, but this is the procedure. I'll present the question we're going to discuss, and you have 10 minutes to prepare your arguments for and against. And then you also have to choose a spokesperson that will present for 3 minutes the arguments for and against. So the proposer will speak, the opposer will follow. There's a retreat for 10 minutes in order to consider the arguments that have been raised and to respond accordingly to the opposed and proposer team. And we'll follow with a 2 minutes session of intervention by both teams. Finally, with closing the debate, and we vote for and against the proposed motion. Is that okay? Okay. We also count today on the participation of our student ambassadors. So I would like to suggest, if that be okay with you, I think it would be very interesting to bring the student voice to that preparation of your arguments. So would you be happy with participating with each of the teams and to provide the perspective of the student voice? Okay. So thanks for that. That's completely off the cuff, by the way. I hadn't was there here. I think it was very valuable. So thanks really for participating. And the motion is that this House believes the flipped classroom model is an effective approach to teaching and learning. So just to recap on those that arrived a bit later, we have showcased a little video that explains what the flipped classroom is about. We are okay with that. We've taken an initial poll that shows 100% agreement with the motion. We'll see if that's going to change. And we've divided the group on segment for the motion and a segment against the motion. And we have from now 10 minutes to prepare our arguments. So the proposer will first speak for the motion for a total of 3 minutes, and the opposer will follow talking against the motion for 3 minutes. So whenever you are ready, proposing team. So it's opposer, sorry, we kind of confuse the label.
Opposer first. Oh, the opposer first?
No, we propose opposer first and opposer second, if that's okay. I'm kind of rules. So,
another word.
Okay. So, for the motion, 3 minutes. Okay. 3 minutes. We start.
Okay. I suppose the first thing to consider is the model of the flipped classroom that we're going to use, and one of the things that we discussed in the group very strongly was good models of the flipped classroom. So not just saying to students, here's something that you take, you watch it at home, end of story, we don't care if you watch it or you don't, and we'll see what happens in the classroom. So the idea was that if you have a good model of the flipped classroom, whereby you're creating good quality materials, with accompanying activities which students can do on their own or do in pairs or in groups, be scaffolded, then that creates for a situation which allows the teacher and the learner to adhere to principles of good teaching and learning in the classroom. So it would be lots of interaction in the classroom, independent learning outside of the classroom, which can then form the basis of what goes on in the classroom. What was the things we talked about? Independent learning, catering for different learning styles, of course. So you have students who learn in lots and lots of different ways. Some of them learn quite well independently. Some of them learn quite well through information transmission. Others learn through collaborative models of learning. Some students learn quite well in active ways. And it also allows for more critical engagement with the material in the classroom, with others, with their peers, and with the teacher. Yes, we did talk about the importance, and this is back again to the model, a good model of the flipped classroom, whereby assessment is built into all aspects of the process, all stages of the process. So from the very beginning, if you're asking students to do something, and it's not just students, this is a human trait. Motivation happens very often when there are external incentives, and those incentives might be assessment-based, they might be based on other things also, but for example, giving students a task to complete and allocating a certain percentage of that, of the overall grade for a module or the percentage for the module to that task will incentivize it and help students to engage with it in more effective ways in advance, so that the model that you want to use in the classroom in terms of stronger engagement and collaboration and critical discussion will be more effective, and you don't end up in a situation whereby you're having to revert to a transmission-based model of delivering information in the classroom. Now, all of this, of course, is based on the assumption that what you want to replace by the flipped classroom was a model of transmission-based education, so a lecture. And that's where the flipped classroom works best, I think. So I wouldn't like to suggest that, I don't think anybody in the group would like to suggest that we would replace very effective tutorials or discussions or any of those things by the flipped classroom. What we're saying is this is an effective model for replacing a lecture-based, transmission-based model of education, which I don't think is a good model of education in any case, and anything better than that, including the flipped classroom, if it's done well, must surely be more effective. 3, 2, 1.
Could I suggest if it's okay that both teams face each other for a more efficient debate kind of scenario? If that's okay with you at all, that would be, so second to set up that So, opposers, whenever you're ready.
Okay, we discussed a number of the points raised by Fiona already. And we agreed that this is a very good model for second level particularly. But for third level, it's got a lot of issues attached to it. Primarily, yes, you can, I suppose, tailor-make it for specific disciplines, etc. But when you look at the lecture hall of 200, 300 students, it's going to get very messy. Producing a particular lesson where you have a lot of activities, you're handing out scissors and glue type of thing, it might get a bit messy. So it also might have, of course, the effect of taking away from the value of the tutorial itself. The tutorial is there, it's the opportunity for the lecturer, the tutor, the teacher to get involved with a smaller group of students, to engage them, to make eye contact, to make personal contact, and to discuss the points raised in the lecture. Now, that's not to say that our lectures can't be dynamic. We can produce our podcasts, we can produce our videos, etc., put them up on the screen, etc., etc., etc. But to try and measure the effectiveness of your message and your teaching, and to be able to measure interaction with your students in such a big environment where you have a very populated environment with 200 or 300 students is a lot more difficult to do. To be able to engage that classroom for 50 minutes, if it's a 2-hour lecture or a 3-hour lecture, it's quite a task to do. One wonders what the benefit is then, or the effect is on the students themselves. Are they feeling lost in the melee, basically, of too much stuff happening, too busy? And what do you do in the tutorial then? What is the tutorial for? I'm just thinking from my own discipline, the history. Then the tutor becomes redundant maybe because of this, or feeling that they've got nothing to offer. Preparing something before the class begins, before the lecture, is something that students are encouraged to do anyway, in reading lists, etc. So there's nothing new there. Giving them a video to watch might be an idea. There's something that you could also prepare in understanding what's going to be discussed in the lecture itself. But really, this kind of this method is already in place right now. So basically, I suppose, just to sum up in general, there are the 3 main points there. Is the effect on the tutorial, that does it become redundant, or is this a way down the road of not having to spend money on tutorials? The assessment is going to be difficult to achieve, and basically, I think students, rather than being retained because of this.
Next Okay, so thanks for the arguments. We have now 10 minutes to reconvene teams and prepare arguments against or return to the other team on the points that have been raised. And so, okay. So, time to get 2 minutes interventions ready. In this case, we'll reverse the order of teams. We'll ask the opposer team to speak first, and we'll end up with the proposer team to begin second. 2 minutes in this occasion, so it's a shorter intervention. And whenever you're ready.
Okay. Just on some of the points, I'll probably not get on. Some of the points made by Fiona there on, tailor-making the lecture. This lecture where we're going to have, as I say, a full house of 200 students, a history lecture, let's say. There's a lot of time going to be involved, resources in preparing these. We're talking, if you're going to be doing this for every lecture, certainly it's going to be the case. You're going to really spend your time off or your summer siesta working very much on preparing this material. Now, having done all that, to what extent are you going to reap a reward? To what extent will you be able to actually honestly and forensically assess the outcomes? Or will you just end up making assumptions on standards reached at the end of the day in such a big class situation? The argument from the other side that the lecture is not an effective way of teaching is something that really could be questioned for centuries. As we mentioned, maybe say Martin Luther, etc. The lecture from medieval times has been something that has produced some of the greatest minds of the centuries gone by, and even the current century, with people like Michael Higgins, for example, who would have would have been well used to delivering lectures and learning from them as well. These kind of minds that we have in this country, great academics, etc., etc. So that's really not a good argument in that sense. Certainly, a boring lecture, a lecture that has not had any preparatory work done to it, that is not dynamic, that is not using digital devices itself, or using other kinds of learning resources effectively, is never good. You couldn't accuse a lot of the lecturers here on campus of being boring. They put a lot of work and effort into delivering what they have to deliver in whatever the discipline is. So I think it undermines the quality and the effectiveness of the teaching itself.
Okay, let's stop there. Thank you very much. And finally, 2 minutes for the proposer team to come back with the argument.
Can I just, for clarification, am I counteracting what has just been said, or am I counteracting what was made in the original?
In the original,
in the original, so I can't come back on some of those points.
it's okay.
Maybe I can indirectly.
Okay, right?
Okay, yeah. I suppose the point that I want to start on is the point in relation to the lecture and the tutorial. And I think we would very much see a flipped classroom model as strengthening the tutorial model rather than getting rid of it. I think thinking about, rather than calling it lecture and tutorial, I'd like to think about the learning experience. So what we would want to create is a learning experience, whether it's in a lecture hall or in a tutorial room, if you want to make that distinction, an experience which allows students to engage critically with the material, to do the sorts of things that they now do in the tutorial model, or in some cases in the lecture model. So back to the original point of, it's not about whether it's a lecture or a tutorial, it's about whether the principles of good teaching and learning are imbued in that context. And if they are, then there's no problem with the lecture. If they are, it's no problem with the tutorial. If they are, there's no problem with having a flipped classroom model. It's about the principles and having those good principles in that sort of scenario. I think I would perhaps argue against the fact that lectures produce good minds. There's absolutely no evidence in the world to say that lectures on their own produce good minds. There's a strong argument to say that good minds are produced as a result of a range of good learning experiences, whatever they may be, one of which may be a good lecture. And I have no argument against that at all. I would agree completely. But to say that lecturers in and of themselves produce good minds, I think is probably an oversimplification. The assessment argument, which was one of the other ones that was raised by Vincent and his group, the counter-argument to that is quite simply good assessment models are good assessment models, and they work within a flipped classroom model just as well as they work within a traditional model. So again, a variety of assessments that cater for a range of learning styles, assessments that engage students critically, can be applied to a good flipped classroom model just as easily as they can be applied to a traditional education.
Thanks very much. Well, it may have been slightly unfair to have the English teacher and learning in the proposal.
Unfair on me!
The things were have been decided before you joined the session, to be honest. It was not prepared. So, thanks for engaging with the exercise. I hope that the discussions were what the learning was about in this session. But remember that we had a pre-session little poll on the, your feelings on the classroom model, and now it's time to see if your opinions have stayed the same or shifted. Given the very well, the good arguments posed by the opposite in this case. So what I propose you to do is a little exercise of electronic voting, which works as follows. We're going to use a poll everywhere, and you can use your mobile device, tablet, or whatever you have at hand. Your phone will do. You can vote in 3 different ways, for or against the motion. That the flip classroom model is an effective approach to teaching and learning, true or false. So if you want to text, the rate is normal message, maybe go by your network charges. Be assured that your phone is not going to be used for stored, I don't have access to the numbers, or it won't be used hacked for anything else in the future. So just text true or false to that phone number. You need to join in the first place and then text your answer. Also, I actually need to go to poll everywhere to activate this poll. But, and I'll give you 1 second. Give me a second.
Do you want to write the number on the board, maybe, Angelica, so people can?
Yeah, I just see it there after logging in.
Come up there, will it?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, I should have logged in before.
How many times can each person vote?
400.
You need to vote twice.
Yeah. So that's that. So that's the phone number there. That's it. That's enough. And if you want to vote by the website, it's paulf.com/ulcdl. If you want to tweet, you can just send a tweet to Angelica /L and send your answer. Your Twitter followers will not see this message, so you will need to. So you can text ULCDL to that number and then true or false. Okay, as for the responses are coming through now. And of course, we rest assured that you are voting with your heart in hand, not really unbiased by the team membership composition. As a reliable exercise doesn't do much really, but okay, last votes are coming in. So of course, but hold on. Of course, what happens before is that we planted our student ambassadors as actual spies. And you're actually voting in an honest fashion. So everyone had an opportunity to cast their votes? Yes?
Not yet.
No.
That's not my time. That's not my time. Okay. Happy with that? Okay. Thanks, Paul. So therefore, this House declares the motion passed, and the proposal team, in this case, won. But I have to highlight that a number of people showed some reservations that didn't exist before this exercise took place. Well, taking it for granted, of course, needless to say that everyone has voted in accordance to their true beliefs. So I hope that that exercise was useful into considering what are some things that are likely to work best and are likely to be challenges when we look at different ways to approach a flipped classroom model. We had a session with Professor Alejandra Melini back in November who dwelled with some of these issues, and I thought it was interesting to capture some of those insights in a very simple way into what tends not to work in a flipped classroom model, and it may have been part of the conversations today. What may happen is that you prepare your pre-session content, cognitive exposure to the topics, context, concepts, and so on, and you expect students to engage with the material, followed by a face-to-face session for analysis, discussion, hands-on work, reflection, whatever it is, followed by a post-session consolidation evaluation exercise. What happens a lot of the time is that you arrive to your tutorial, haven't only to discover that your students haven't meaningfully engaged with the material that you were expecting them to cover. So what he was suggesting is that there's a missing ingredient there. There's something that needs to happen between the content delivery in an online format and the classroom-based engagement. Something needs to happen between. And that is ideally harnessed through assessment, and by aligning very meaningfully assessments with the way that the learning path is designed in an either online or face-to-face scenario, by asking students, by requesting and ensuring students have to do something meaningful with that content, have to engage with that content in a way. That could take many shapes and forms. It could be an online discussion, it could be a poll, it could be a collaborative reading effort that has to happen before, and that is in very concrete ways defined and assessed as well in a continuous assessment fashion. So that was his concrete suggestion, and I think it is a good one to do. Obviously, my little exercise of you answering the poll was just kind of a mini example of that, what that should be, but it could have been something more meaningful than that. Obviously, there's a consolidation and putting in application what we've done today, and in this particular case scenario, I hope that this actually follows in the way of lots of conversations about your particular classes, what you want to do, and how we can help you from the daily side of things to implement those scenarios. Or it may be the case of many of you applying for the Innovation Fund that we launched this morning in producing a particular open educational resource that you want to purpose in a flipped classroom model. If you want to learn more about flipped classrooms, there's obviously a wealth of material out there. I provide one of the links here. I have it open here. As one of the many resources, I think it's useful in that it provides many practical examples of what those activities could look like. You may want to show evidence of impact previous cohorts. You may want to do interviews with industry leaders, and so depending on the different objectives that you are looking for. So this is a useful resource to follow up in terms of how can I get inspiration, so it doesn't become yet a repetition of the push content, have a discussion board, follow up with further discussion in the class sort of scenario, but there's actually a nice bit of variety embedded, and I think the students will get from that. So that's where we leave it, not ready for the next session. I hope that you found it of interest. and hopefully it's the start of many follow-up conversations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.